Hello, and welcome to the first of three webinar sessions focused on cybersecurity. My name is Verena McCarthy, and I'm from the Queensland Government's Cybersecurity Unit. Today's session is being delivered on our behalf by Kudos Management. This webinar is about managing your cybersecurity. Kudos will explain how to apply layers of security protection or defence in depth. Kudos will discuss the importance of awareness and training, policies, procedures, and practical controls to improve cyber resilience for your business and include practical demonstrations and scenarios. Please remember that this information provided is general in nature and is not a substitute for independent professional advice. Participants should obtain any appropriate professional advice relevant to their circumstances. Today, we join you from the traditional lands of the Yagara and Turrbal people. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging and recognise their connection to country and role in caring and maintaining country for thousands of years. May their strength and wisdom be with us today. As we are recording this session, all mics and cameras have been muted. Questions will be answered at the end of the session. At the completion of the webinar, we'll be emailing out an information sheet and a link to a feedback form. Your feedback is vital to us to understand how this session has been of benefit and will help us structure future programs. It'd be great if you could take 5 minutes to complete the feedback form. To explore the topic, managing your cybersecurity, let me introduce you to Alan Jones and the team from Kudos Management. Alan is the CEO of Kudos Management, which is a management system software provider and consultancy practice based in Queensland. Alan has 30 years' experience as a management systems consultant and software developer. He is also a qualified certification auditor for ISO 27001, Information Security, CSA Cloud Security, and many other standards. He'll be joined by Cody Height, who has over 20 years' experience in IT management and specialises in information security. Over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Verena, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Cybersecurity is the hot topic that everyone is talking about, and we've a lot to cover today, so let's get started. Some of you may have joined us when we recently delivered a series of webinars that were a guide to general introduction to information security, a guide to the new version of the ISO 27001 international standard, and the process of achieving certification. Recordings of those webinars are available online, and we'll be providing links to them in the handout. In this series of webinars, we'll be taking a deeper dive into some of the important elements of cybersecurity. These will be 1, managing your cybersecurity, 2, the use of cloud services, and 3, business continuity. In this first webinar, we'll be explaining about some of the typical cyber threats faced by small and medium enterprises, or SMEs. We'll also discuss how you can protect your business against them. You'll often see these two terms mentioned, cyber security and information security. Is it just two different ways of saying the same thing, or is there a difference between them? Well, actually, yes, there is a difference. Information security is about protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. It involves the protection of data across all mediums. Whereas cybersecurity is a subset of that. It applies to the protection of data stored online or when using online services. When experts talk about this topic, they use certain terminology. Before we go any further, let me explain what they are in plain English. The idea of cyber resilience is that you can withstand a cyber attack and carry on in business. There are a number of definitions, and on screen there's one taken from NIST, which is the American National Institute of Standards and Technology. The concept of defense in depth is a strategy of using multiple security measures to protect your assets. If one layer of defense is compromised, additional layers exist to ensure that those threats are stopped at some point along the way. The concept can be visualized as the layers of an onion. When you peel away one layer, there's another one underneath. The key takeaway here, I think, is to build resilience into your management system so that you're not relying on just one control. There needs to be a multi-layered approach for a good level of protection. It's also important to remember that cybersecurity is not just for the IT department. In modern life, we're all frequently using online resources such as email, websites, cloud services for banking, purchasing, social media, and so on. Each time we go online, we're exposing ourselves to potential threats. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't go online. It just means that we need to be aware of those threats and take action to protect ourselves. You may ask, why do we need to manage cybersecurity? I can give you two good reasons here. The first is to mitigate financial loss. Some cyber threats could lead to either a direct loss from your bank account or the inability to do business on a temporary or even a permanent basis. The second is to gain client trust and therefore contracts. Many government bodies and large corporates will want to know about the security measures you have in place before considering you for sizable contracts. And it's not just a big business issue. The stats will amaze you. A recent study showed that 43% of cyber attacks were actually against SMEs. The sad fact is that same study revealed that 75% of SMEs cannot operate if hit with a ransomware attack, which could result in permanent closure if unable to recover data. I'm sure we have your attention now. We're going to discuss some of the typical cybersecurity threats listed here and how you can protect your business against them. We've all heard about ransomware, haven't we? It's a common and dangerous type of malware that locks up or encrypts your files so that you can no longer access them. It's usually accompanied by a ransom demand. The threat is that if you do not pay the demand, the files will not be unlocked, or in some cases, they may get publicly revealed. Here's a real-life example of a ransomware attack. It's a manufacturing company that has a contract to supply component parts for a larger technical product. They come into work one morning to find that their server and their devices are locked and they cannot log into them. All that's displayed on the screen is a ransom demand with instructions on how to pay. The question of whether or not they should pay the demand wasn't relevant in this case, as they couldn't afford to do so anyway. They then found that they had inadequate backups and there was no contingency plan in place. With the loss of information and reputation, they soon ceased trading. There are several layers of protection we can put in place to mitigate against ransomware. They include password management, MFA or multi-factor authentication, antivirus and security software, a good backup regime, business continuity and disaster recovery planning. Let's take a look at some of those layers. The first layer we'll cover here is password management. That's quite a large topic, and it's fair to say that what's considered good practice has matured over the years, and we'll be providing more information on that in the handout. Here, my colleague Cody Height talks about the importance of changing default passwords.
So one of the common ways to protect from ransomware, although very basic, is often missed because of how simple it is to actually do something about it. The problem is a lot of applications, devices, and even things on the network out of the box from the manufacturer, they come with a default password that's very easy to guess. And obviously it's publicly known as it's advertised over all the support material. And without changing these, the problem is it's very easy for an attacker to go, okay, well, I can see your network. Let's try the default password that comes from the manufacturer. And quite often this hasn't been changed. So it's important that all these are changed to a password that isn't a default password that's easy to remember and easy to guess. And if you find something on the network that is using a default password, that should be reported and basically actioned so all the passwords are complex and aren't publicly known.
MFA, or multi-factor authentication, is requiring a user to provide 2 or more means of identification before granting them access to a valuable asset. The idea is that if an unauthorized person finds out or guesses one, they still need to obtain another before gaining access. It therefore offers much greater protection. Authentication factors can be classified into 3 groups. Something you know, such as a password or PIN. Something you have, such as a credit card or bank card. Something you are, or biometrics. These are unique physical or behavioral characteristics that can identify you, such as your fingerprint, iris pattern, voice, or face. Increasingly, cloud services and software providers are offering MFA options, and it's an easy win to activate them. Security software can help to protect against ransomware. Here's Cody to discuss further.
There's obviously several ways to protect yourself from a ransomware attack. I'm going to talk about some of the specialized software that's available, as traditionally a lot of people have thought, great, I need antivirus protection. I'm going to have all that updating and protecting everything. The problem is some antivirus software doesn't actually come with ransomware protection, or if it does, it's actually not enough. Because the problem is traditionally everyone thought, okay, ransomware is going to come into the device level and attack your data there, but that's actually not the case. It will do that, but it's also going to attack like websites, any applications that you use, anywhere basically that company data is stored, so that's servers. So it's going to attack places that, yes, you might have a traditional antivirus, but it's also going to attack places where there's applications and websites where you might not have a traditional antivirus software running. So you need to look at, I guess, newer, more modern kind of software that basically will protect against the kind of threats. And this software basically stops it from coming into your network or onto your devices. And then your antivirus software should be the next layer of defense.
In the event that something does get through our previous layers, it's important to have backups that are outside the range of attack.
So I'm going to talk about another important thing to do with ransomware attacks, and that's backups. Obviously, it's well known that we all need backups. The problem is quite often we get complacent with this and we think we've got a backups system in place and that's all we need. Problem is there's a lot more to backups than just saying I'm backing up the data. First, we need to look at things like, okay, what data are we backing up? Is all the critical data being backed up? How often is it being backed up? Is it being backed up regularly enough, whether that's daily or even multiple times throughout the day? So you could restore to a point in time, because even though you might have specialized software to block from ransomware attacks, you might have antivirus that has built-in ransomware protection. Obviously, one of your layers of defense needs to be backups. So in the event something does get through all these layers, you've got something to fall back on. So besides having like point of time backups or regular backups, you also need to look at things like is your backup actually offline? And when I say offline, I don't mean not connected to the cloud or not connected to your network, but is there a version that isn't going to get encrypted when you have a ransomware attack? Because quite often people have backups in place, but the ransomware attack attacks the network, the devices, and also your backups that are attached to that network. So you need a source of backups that basically isn't going to be attacked by your ransomware. So they're the kind of things you need to look at.
Right. We'll now demonstrate a simple way of checking security on your device.
Okay, I'm going to show you a very simple way to check the security on your device to help protect against a ransomware attack. To do this, if you go into the bottom right-hand corner, there'll be a Windows Security Center. This is obviously only available on a Windows device, but if you're using some other kind of device, they'll also have a similar area or additional software you may have. As you can see, it's telling me that there's an issue potentially with the virus and threat protection. So I'm going to go in there. I'm going to do a quick scan. This is something that's probably good best practice to do from time to time. Your IT department may use some special software that actually automates this process and reports on it scanning in the background. You'll notice here it's telling me I don't have any ransomware protection basically enabled, and it's recommending that I set up OneDrive just because it has obviously ransomware protection built in. You may use other software, but it's important to use some kind of software that's going to help if your files do get attacked, that you can easily recover them. But I'm going to let that scan finish. But while that's going, I'm going to go back here and look at another warning it's giving me. And that's telling me basically that my computer isn't potentially blocking unwanted apps. So I'm going to go into that and I'm going to turn that on. And what that does is basically helps my device recognize if some kind of unusual app is installed and doing things it shouldn't do. I'm going to go back and you'll see that that's got a green tick. Basically, the scan's still running and you can see this is still warning me I need to set up basically ransomware protection. I might know in this case that I'm using some other software that isn't OneDrive, so I might be safe to dismiss that. But if I didn't, I probably need to bring that up with IT to address, as it's telling me I have no protection. And if we go back, you can see now everything is green and telling me I'm all secure. So that's some simple steps to help keep your device secure.
A ransomware attack could be included as a what-if scenario in your BCP or business continuity plan. And we'll be looking at BCPs in the third webinar of this series, so be sure to join us for that one. Phishing is a form of social engineering, meaning to use fake or fraudulent communications, such as emails, to deceive someone into disclosing sensitive information, installing malware, or making a payment. The word originates from phishing, spelt with an F, meaning to use bait to catch the unwary fish. Computer hacking slang often replaces F with a PH, hence the spelling of phishing in this case. Our example this time is a facilities management business. Their accounts department received an email from their regular telecoms provider advising that the bank account for payment transfers had now changed. They started paying into the new account as requested. After a while, they started to receive overdue payment demands. After some discussions, it was found that the change of account email did not originate from the telecoms provider, but was a scam. They were then obliged to pay many thousands of dollars to the real provider. Once again, there are several layers of protection that we could put in place. They include encrypting data, use strong passwords, use MFA, awareness, do not open suspicious email or click on suspicious links, updating operating systems and applications, and not It's sharing information unnecessarily on social media. So let's take a look at some of those layers. We need to ensure that our workers are aware of how to spot a phishing attack. Here's a practical example.
Okay, I'm going to show you some very simple steps to help keep yourself secure and safe from phishing attacks. Basically, I've got an example email here that you may have seen before or something not dissimilar. And it's an email saying my account password has expired from Microsoft. So a few simple ways to check to see if it is a legitimate email is to scroll up, and you'll notice at the top it's telling me where it's come from, the MS Online Services team. If I look closely at where it's coming from, it's telling me Microsoft Online or a version of that, but you'll notice that Microsoft isn't actually spelled correctly, and microsoftonline.com may not actually be a Microsoft domain. So straight away, to me, that says that doesn't seem right. That's most likely a phishing attack. If you're unsure, obviously you could speak to someone in IT to confirm that, but straight away that's saying to me that's not a legitimate email. If I scroll down, obviously another way is to look at the general contents of what the message is. Is it using that company's colors and logo? Is there spelling issues in the contents of the email? Some are obviously designed better than others and maybe perfectly and match the branding. Others you look at and go, that just doesn't seem right. Obviously, another thing to think is, well, if I've been using this password for, in this case, it's saying it's valid for 120 days. Did 120 days ago, did I get a similar email? So kind of stop for a minute and think to yourself, am I expecting this? Is this legitimate? If I'm unsure, obviously you should check with IT because they'll be able to confirm. As you may say, well, I've never received a password expiry email before, so why would I get one now? I'm going to ask IT to confirm that this is legitimate. Obviously the other way, and you'll see this red little arrow I've got here, is if you not click on any links, of course, but hover over a link, it will sometimes tell you where that link is really going. Obviously, they're claiming it's going to the portal for office.com, but when I hover over it, it may tell me it's going somewhere different that is not a legitimate URL. So in this case, I could confidently say that this is a phishing email, but if you're unsure, again, check with IT, as it's best to be safe before clicking anything. But there's some general ideas that will help you keep safe from a phishing attack.
Great advice there. Drives in endpoint devices, such as laptops, can be easily encrypted. This will ensure that if the device gets lost or stolen, the data cannot be accessed without proper authentication. This is a demonstration of activating BitLocker, which is an encryption service built into many versions of Microsoft Windows.
Okay, I'm going to show you a very simple way to keep your device secure, and that's using data encryption. I'm on a Windows PC currently, but if you're using an alternative device, they'll also have means to make sure you've got encryption enabled. On a Windows device, if you go down to the start bar and basically type in manage, and you're looking for BitLocker, so I'm going to open that. And you'll notice basically this will basically tell me about the encryption I've got on the drive where all the files are stored, and it's telling me that it's turned off currently. So I'm going to turn it on, and it's going to check a few things just to make sure the requirements are met. I would suggest when you are checking the data encryption and you go to turn it on that you do this at a time when you're not actually needing to use your PC, as it can not take it offline but really slow it down, so it's not a great thing to do if you're about to go into a meeting. There's a few different methods here, and obviously I recommend saving it to Azure if your PC is linked that way. If not, obviously it gives you the option to save the decryption key or the recovery key and print it out. Obviously, if you do these methods, it needs to be stored in a location that's secure and no one can access that, shouldn't access that. So I'm going to save it to Azure. It's going to go through and basically save that. I'm going to go next. And basically I'm going to use the default options here. I'll press next again. And I'm going to use the new encryption method. And because I've enabled basically BitLocker on this test PC before, I'm not going to do the system check. If you hadn't, it's probably best to do that first, just to make sure everything's going to be okay. And then I'm going to start the encryption. And being a test PC, it should actually be quite quick. But you might find with your computer, it takes a lot longer just due to the size of maybe the data that's stored on it. I've got very little data stored on this, just being a test machine. Okay, I've let it speed ahead here just because it took a little bit of time. So you'll now see that it tells me that my C drive is complete and it's got encryption on it. So I'm going to go close. And you'll notice here, basically, it tells me it's all turned on, gives me a few options to back up the recovery key again, turn it off, or suspend the protection, which obviously isn't recommended. But as you can see, it's quite an easy thing to do. And now my drive's encrypted.
Just to reiterate, the encryption can take a long time, and you may need to discuss with your IT department or contractor about activating encryption and securely managing recovery keys. As we consider our layers of protection, let's not forget the obvious.
So one of the ways to obviously protect yourself from a phishing attack is to keep everything up to date. And that obviously includes your traditional, say, Windows operating system or Apple Mac system. This needs to have the latest updates and patches from them. And that flows through also to mobile devices. So whether your latest iPhone has the latest patches installed, or your Google Android phone has the latest updates as well installed, either from Google itself or from the manufacturer like, say, Samsung. But the problem is it doesn't just stop there. You need to look at your third-party applications. A lot of people look at the traditional, I guess, operating systems and realize that needs to be up to date, or your Office applications need to be updated. The problem is a lot of the phishing attacks actually target exploits in third-party applications. Some statistics say up to 86% actually are getting compromised by third-party applications and not your traditional operating system. So you need to look at keeping those up to date as well. The other thing to think about is how quickly are you updating or patching all these systems and applications? As the problem is, sometimes by the time you've actually got around to patching it, it might be 180 days since that exploit is known about. So the attackers are using phishing attacks of known, I guess, exploits because they know it might take you that long to actually patch them. So there is software that can be used to basically help automate and speed up that process, along with other software that can actually block devices that don't meet the minimum requirements. So that way your network's secure and not basically compromised by the weakest link.
What is an insider threat? It can include an employee or other insider stealing valuable information and using it for an unauthorized purpose that causes harm. A scenario in this case is an engineering consultancy. A mid-level design consultant is offered a higher level post and salary by a competitor. For some time before leaving, the individual downloads valuable project and client contact information, which they then take to their new employer. The victim company then loses some of those clients. There are a number of human, organizational, and technological layers of protection that we can put in place. They include pre-employment screening, contract terms, non-disclosure agreements or NDAs, a disciplinary process, the principle of least privilege, access controls, and network monitoring. The first 4 layers that we mentioned are included in the ISO 27001 standard as people controls. The first is about implementing pre-employment screening to help ensure that you only employ suitable people in the first place. The second is ensuring that they sign a contract that includes their information security responsibilities. That can be supplemented by an NDA or non-disclosure agreement that may also be applied to other parties, such as subcontractors. There should also be a formal disciplinary process that would apply when someone has committed an information security violation. Of course, there's no guarantee that these controls will prevent a violation. Therefore, we should also implement some organizational or technological layers of protection. Let's look at applying some basic access controls.
I'm going to talk about one of the ways to protect yourself from insider threats, and that's access controls. And that might be as simple as making sure that physical printed material is kept locked away when not in use, or people aren't at their desk, right through to a certain systems locked away behind a locked door or a locked office. But obviously there's technology solutions as well, and that might involve making sure that when people are leaving their devices unattended, that it goes to a lock screen, so someone that doesn't or shouldn't have access to that system or device can't actually access that information. So there's ways where your system can be configured so if it's left unattended for a period of time, the device automatically locks, or getting people in the habit of simply, say, closing their laptop screen, or making sure their mobile device is configured so that when they do, stop using it, it automatically locks and requires some kind of PIN or passcode to get back into it. Also thinking about things like, what is your offboarding process from a technology point of view? When someone leaves or is in the process of being terminated, are you actually locking them out of everything? And whether that's critical kind of systems, along with access to other things that might not be as critical, but people should have no access at all during that offboarding process. There's also things that can be looked at, like how and when and where are people accessing this information, and that can be controlled by specialist software. So there's some of the ways that should help minimize an insider threat.
And here Cody discusses protection against data leakage.
One of the ways to protect yourself from insider threats is data leak prevention or detection. One of the simple ways to protect from this is making sure that people aren't sharing passwords. As in many organisations, this is either known, where people are happily sharing their password with their colleagues, or in other cases, sometimes they're recording it in an area where everyone else can access it. And this is a very simple step to minimize data leakage. There is other tools obviously that can be used to monitor if passwords have been leaked and shared with other people to prevent an insider attack. And then that moves on to more specialized software that will monitor the systems and network and detect if it thinks large amounts of data or data is going to unusual places, and either block this or notify someone that this is occurring so that it can be investigated. So there's some of the things that would protect you from data leakage.
So just to recap, there are various cybersecurity threats faced by SMEs, and we can protect against them with steps that include leadership and commitment by top management, identifying assets and the risks that they face, developing policies and procedures, implementing technological controls, training workers, monitoring and measuring, responding to incidents, and having recovery plans in place. There is more information on these in the handout. Now that's the end of our presentation for today. So thank you for participating, and back to you, Verena.
Thanks very much to Kudos Management for this practical session about managing your cybersecurity? We've now got a few questions that have been put to the team, which Alan's going to respond to. Our first question, Alan, you spoke about phishing, but what is spear phishing?
Spear phishing. Whereas phishing is generally a bulk attempted scam that's aimed at a large numbers of people, spear phishing is a specific and targeted attack against one individual or a small group of individuals. It's targeted. The scammer will usually know something about the intended victim, perhaps gained through traditional media or social media. The attack may then be aimed at fraudulently obtaining sensitive information or money. That spear phishing is targeted.
We talked about pre-employment screening. Are there any specific requirements, or can you give any guidance around this for us?
Okay, many information security management systems are based on the ISO 27001 standard. So let's use that as our starting point. ISO 27001 control A61 refers to background checks being carried out by people prior to their employment starting. The standard doesn't prescribe exactly what those checks should be, so it's up to an organisation to decide what background checks it considers appropriate to carry out. Typical checks might include references from previous employers, the right for an individual to work in this country, verification of their claimed qualifications, their criminal history, or otherwise known as a police check, and credit checks. So the checks that you choose to apply in any individual case would take into account the role and the business risks associated with it. You also need to consider legal and ethical factors and any relevant contractual requirements that there may be on you.
That's great. And just a last question. Cody talked about third-party applications. What are third-party applications?
So these are generally considered to be applications that are not part of the original operating system that comes with your device, but they're obtained and installed separately. A typical example would be accounting software that I'm sure we all use.
That's great. Wonderful. Well, thanks again to Kudos and all our participants today. We'll send you out the feedback form and information sheet, and watch this space for more sessions about cybersecurity. Thanks.